The aim of this course is to learn how to do research in management science, which will be useful to write a thesis. We will shortly see how to write a thesis. We will see shortly what is science in management. And then we will switch to topics like how to find a research topic, where to find a research topic. You know that the most important part of research is to give a contribution. We will see how to do a literature review. We will see the structure of the thesis, how to develop research design, which might be qualitative or quantitative, and we'll conclude on formal aspects, because in thesis it's also a formal exercise, which means that you have to write correctly in good English. So proofreading is very important, but it's also a question of form. You need a good format. In the document should be clean in terms of language exigencies, but also clean in terms of visual attractiveness. The document is like a last cornerstone in your life at the university. Something which stays, and so it's important that you give us a very clean document, which brings me also to ethical questions such as plagiarism. We start with, what is research for you? Do you already have an idea about a topic? We start about the philosophy of science and views how science is seen today. And this view, or these views, determine actually the methodology you will use. Qualitative methodology, quantitative methodology, or both. Today, most researchers in management science use mostly both approaches, qualitative and quantitative. Let's start with a question. What comes first? Theory or research? Some researchers think that you first research, and then with research you will determine it as theory. Other researchers think that it's more important to have a theory, and then you do research to confirm the theory. Both point of views are right, and it depends on the context of the research you want to do. So let's have a close look. That is, should we take a theory and then test them? This is called a deductive or positive reasoning, or should we find some empirical evidence, so do research first, and then work out the theory, which is called inductive reasoning, or also relative. And actually this is summarized here. If you have a good established theory and literature, you start actually with the theory, you establish your hypothesis, and you observe, you're doing empirical investigation, from which you draw your generalization, and you confirm your theory. This is actually called hypothetic or deductive research. It's also called positivist research, and this is actually the most used research approach in management science. And still most management journals, including market journals, prefer this positivist approach or hypothetic deductive approach. The other approach is, as you might start from observations. It's called inductive approach. From the observations you try to generalize and you establish a theory. And once you have done that, you might switch to a deductive approach and establish hypotheses to confirm your theory, and you do a quantitative, larger sample design which confirms your theory. You know, it's actually topics where we don't know a lot, where literature is scarce, where theory is scarce, we don't have an established theory. In these domains, qualitative research is rather recommended, because this means that you have to establish a theory, and this is generally done by qualitative research. It means that you're not working with representative samplings, big samples, but generally you work with focus groups or individual interviews. On the other hand, if you have established theory, then actually you don't need to go deep in the topic, because you have established theories, which you can use. For example, technology acceptance theory is based on the theory of reasoned action. So we have a lot of theories in social science, management science, and marketing science, and coming from economics, which can be used to test. And that is why the mainstream in management science and marketing science use established theory, can be tested with hypotheses. So hypotheses means which are closed, very precise research questions to which you can give an answer very precisely with statistical tests. So for example, regression, ANOVA, correlation analysis, t-tests, or mean tests. All these tests are quantitative tools which are used in a hypothetic deductive approach, and you either validate, confirm a hypothesis, or you reject it, which is very precise. So this is on the deductive side. On the other hand, on the inductive side, you don't establish hypotheses. You establish very open research questions, because you don't know a lot about the topic. So you cannot test it. You cannot ask very precise questions with measurement scales, like you do in a positive deductive approach. So we have open research questions, to which to try to give an answer by digging very deeply into the topic, by doing qualitative focus groups or individual interviews. And you have no statistical test to validate, because generally you're working with small samples, 10, 15, 20 people. You survey, but not with a 10 or 15 minutes questionnaire. It's in-depth interviews, and you record the data or the interviews, and then you have to analyze it. There are also software tools, but this kind of text analysis here. So, today you have quantitative tools that can analyze very big text through text mining in order to give you feedback or input on the topic. But this is qualitative research. Again, it's not about what is better or better. There are contexts where qualitative research fits better. For example, if you work on very new topics, if you take the example about IoT, there was very few literature, so we started to do qualitative research in order to understand what are the acceptance factors for IoT or smart objects. Working on artificial intelligence and autonomous cars, there's very few literature, or most literature comes from engineering science, about technologies, but not about social acceptance factors and trust and all these social concepts. It is adequate to start with qualitative research in order to know more about how consumers perceive AI and autonomous cars. And above all, most of us don't really know what is AI and how autonomous cars work. So if you do a questionnaire, and that is probably the main limit also with our study about autonomous cars and the smart home. Because most of the customers, and probably during your surveys, you saw that some customers perhaps struggled with the different concepts, because we are not really familiar with these technologies yet. And therefore, it would make sense to start with a qualitative research, to dig deeper into this topic and to survey customers more deeply about what they think about these technologies. So in summary, in deductive approach, theory comes first and is tested. In inductive approach, research comes first in order to establish theory. Most PhDs today are done with both. Generally, students start with the qualitative research, and even we as confirmed researchers, we often start with the qualitative design in order to have a first idea about the topic. And then the more we know about the topic, the more we find theories, the more we go over to a deductive approach with a more hypothetic deductive approach, where we have closed research questions called hypotheses, which we then test statistically with larger samples, representative samples, because the aim of science is generalization. We want to generalize our results to other domains, which is mostly the main limit. As you have seen, you've read research articles, there are also always limits. And one of the main limits is that our research is often not representative. We use convenience samples, student samples, we use samples from France, from Thailand, from China. But can we transpose the results from Chinese populations to the European populations? Probably not, because there are cultural barriers which we cannot control. And that is why it's important to do replications again. So test, retest, and we're always testing in order to establish a good theory. Don't be afraid if you do a qualitative research. It does not mean that qualitative is bad. We have more and more now PhDs based only also on qualitative research. It's a science, it's very scientific. There are methods, but this means that you have to acquire methodologies. There's now we have a scientific corpus of methods which can be used. You have statistical software tools, for example in vivo with R, Sphinx, which are tools which you can use to do text or to analyze focus groups or in-depth interviews.
So in summary, quantitative research is applied for confirmatory research if the research question is narrowly defined and profound knowledge theory is available. Whereas qualitative research is more exploratory when the research question is not defined and little knowledge is available. For quantitative research, theories are tested. It's a deductive approach with testing theory and hypothesis. It's a causal, explanative approach with investigation that tests causality between variable x, which is the reason for the change of variable y. Whereas for qualitative research, induction is done without hypothesis. Theory becomes the endpoint in the inductive approach. Qualitative research is causal, focuses on spatio-temporal independent causal law statements, which needs replications, which is not applicable to qualitative research. The sample for quantitative research is representative or should be representative for the population and is drawn from the sample, whereas qualitative research is done with a non-representative sample, focus groups or smaller in-depth interviews. And finally, the generalizability of results for quantitative research might be spatio-temporal independent, so the results should be valid for the population, no matter if the study is done in Germany, France, Great Britain, US, or any other country, and should be independent of time. So if we replicate a study, it should hold in these different countries. There should be identical results if the measurement is replicated under the same conditions with an objective systemization of regularities and empirical generalization through replication to establish social laws. So it's a deductive approach where the generalization comes from general inferences or observations to individual observations. For example, if in a representative German sample of different German lakes all swans are white, then the swans must also be white in the Lake of Constance. So we generalize from general inferences or observations from different lakes to an individual observation, that is the Lake of Constance. Which is not the case for qualitative research because the results are not valid for the entire population. That is why we're talking about inductive approaches. The generalizations come from individual inferences or observations, and we come then to general observations. For example, if in a representative German sample of swans, in one German lake all swans are white, then the swans in all German lakes must be white. And so we come from an individual result and try to draw the general observations from the individual result.